Good afternoon and welcome to the City of Casey Council meeting on the 18th of May 2021. My name is Nolene Duff and I'm the Chair of the Panel of Administrators at the City of Casey, and it's my pleasure to welcome you, those that are watching live stream and those in the public gallery this afternoon. In line with the relaxed restrictions by the Victorian Government on public gatherings, the public gallery is open this afternoon. I'd like to start with the statement of acknowledgement. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities and their rich culture, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. The diversity statement. The City of Casey is home to a remarkable diversity with many cultures, languages, faiths and communities of worship, ages, LGBTQI+ identities and landscapes, together forming our rich and dynamic community history. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. It's my pleasure this afternoon to welcome my colleague administrators. On my left is Mr Miguel Belmar.
Good afternoon.
And on my right, Mr Cameron Boardman.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon.
And we're joined today by our Acting Chief Executive Officer, James Collins.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And a number of our senior executive staff, Ms Jen Bednar, Director Customer and Business Transformation, Ms Kerry New, Acting Director City Planning and Infrastructure, Ms Sheena Frost, Director Corporate Services, and we're assisted this afternoon by our other staff, Simon and Jordan, our AV technicians, and Jacinta McLeod and Reese Matoulis from the governance team. So thank you. I now move to item 2, which is the confirmation of minutes, and they are the minutes of the council meeting held on the 20th of April 2021. Do I have a mover and seconder to confirm the minutes?
I'm happy to move those.
Thank you, Mr Belmar.
Seconded, Chair.
Mr Boardman, all in favour? Carried. Item 3 is declaration of interests. I have considered my obligations under section 130 of the Local Government Act 2020 and do not have any conflict of interest relevant to the agenda papers this afternoon. I also note no officers have declared any conflict with reports presented this afternoon's meeting. Do my fellow administrators have any conflicts to declare?
I have no conflicts to declare.
Likewise, Chair, nothing to declare.
None to declare, thank you. I now move to public question time, and we have received one public question for this afternoon's council meeting. The submitter is Mr Rex Flannery. I note that Mr Flannery is not in the gallery, but I will offer Mr Flannery the courtesy of responding to his question. And that is, I would like to ask Council if they would consider contacting Vic Roads for the installation of traffic lights at the corner of Golf Links Road, Cranbourne, Narre-Warren Road, due to the traffic congestion for vehicles trying to cross Cranbourne, Narre-Warren Road turning right. I can advise Mr Flannery, officers have indicated that they are fully aware of the community concerns with congestion and safety at this particular intersection, and there has been significant advocacy in recent years to the Department of Transport to upgrade this arterial road intersection, which is not a direct responsibility of Council. Previous feedback from the Department of Transport noted that the installation of traffic signals at this intersection is unlikely to be funded under current road safety programs. However, the Department of Transport have confirmed that the site will continue to be assessed and evaluated for funding under future programs. Notwithstanding the previous response from the Department of Transport, this intersection is one of 10 arterial road locations in Council's ongoing Commit to Casey campaign, advocating to the state government and relevant authorities for the upgrade of similar arterial road intersections. So thank you, Mr Flannery, for your question. I now move on to item 5, officer reports, and there are 8 officer reports this afternoon and 1 confidential report which will be considered in closed council. So I move to item 5.1, which is the quarterly report January to March 2021. And can I have a mover for that report?
Yes, I will move that report.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. In moving this report, I'm mindful that at tonight's meeting we are addressing a number of issues that consider the long-term vision of Council, and there are some matters addressed in this quarterly report that informed some of the discussion we'll be having later this afternoon. What I really want to focus on in reviewing and considering this quarterly report, it contains the work that Council's done between January to March of this year. I note in particular that it includes the time during which the Salandra Recreation Reserve was opened, and I note also that we have 3 other recreation reserves that are nearing completion. I note also that it was at the time during which our leadership program was launched and participants were able to attend at Bunjil, and we had over 200 applicants, of which 30 have been chosen to participate. And also during the period that at Casey Fields, both Melbourne City Football Club and the Casey Demons were able to start using facilities again, and that's all post-COVID, and it's all demonstrating that the facilities are being able to be used, and that in the post-COVID environment, Council and its work over the years is bearing fruit. Finally, I note also from with respect to the financial report that COVID obviously has put ongoing challenges before Council, and again we'll be addressing those later in this meeting, but I'm confident that we're in a good financial position, certainly as referred to in that quarterly report. And with those comments, I would move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Thank you, Chair. We do, as Mr Belmar has said, have a very extensive agenda where there is a number of corporate documents and planning documents to talk about. I don't want to go into too much detail except to make one note in regards to this report, which is on page 27 of the Council papers, which shows that at the end of the March quarter, the Council is showing a surplus of $168 million, which is 34% favourable to budget. Whilst we have been completely transparent with our income statements and the cash position of budget of the Council, that may be interpreted as being somewhat surprising and if not necessarily reflecting where our priorities are. We do put the qualification in there that, of course, expenses of $32 million are lower than budget, primarily relating to the COVID restrictions, and also there has been readjustments of materials and services through reclassifications. They are now classified as capital projects. But I think we all acknowledge the last 12 months has been a difficult, challenging, unusual financial period, one of which is going to have some ongoing ramifications for how we decide upon future priorities. But going through a process such as this to be completely transparent and disclosing absolutely our financial position and our achievements against our stated strategic targets is undoubtedly a very healthy thing that we do encourage the community to read. But I think it was appropriate, Chair, to make those comments, and with that I endorse Mr Belmar's moving of the Council report.
Thank you. I'll put that motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Now move on to item 5.2, which, as Mr Boardman has indicated, is a suite of strategic documents that the Council will be considering this afternoon. And I'd just like to make some overall introductory comments before I move to a mover and seconder. It's quite a momentous afternoon today because this work that we are considering in item 5.2 is the culmination of considerable work that's been undertaken both by the organisation and by the community through our extensive community engagement and consultation program. And that is the consideration of Council's long-term vision, the Community Vision 2031, Council Plan 21 to 25, the Annual Budget 21-22, Capital Works Program 21-22, Annual Action Plan 21-22 and our Deliberative Community Engagement Update. And these documents are all part of the requirements on the Council under the Local Government Act, in particular at the commencement of the Council's 4-year term. So over the last 6 to 12 months, Council has undertaken the largest community engagement campaign, which was called Shape Your City. And I know a number of you listening this afternoon will recognise the Shape Your City program that was undertaken. I think it's a real credit to the organisation that over 6,600 people have been engaged through the various channels of the engagement program, and that's included some extensive community forums, but also included online surveys and hosted conversations throughout the community. So I want to say at the outset, thank you to all of those people who have participated or those who have watched the consultation program. We're very appreciative of your input, and it really has led to, I think, a very rich outcome in terms of the proposed future direction of Council over the next 4 years. The insights from that consultation campaign have distilled down into 5 key themes, and they are consistent across the municipality, and they're themes that the community have suggested that Council should prioritise. So they have most definitely been woven into the strategic documents. And I'll just outline, by way of headline summary, those 5 key themes. Cleanliness and maintenance of public places and spaces, crime and safety, community connection, which was a very strong theme, transport of all kinds, and improving confidence in Council. So those 5 themes are part of the key elements of our strategic documents. And our new draft vision is to become a more connected, bold and resilient community. So I think it's fair to say that our draft council plan has brought to life that feedback that we've had in the Shape Your City program, and it sets out how we intend to work with our community, with key stakeholders, community groups, surrounding municipalities and other levels of government to achieve the very best outcomes for this city over the coming 4-year period. There are 7 key strategic objectives in the council plan over the next 4 years, and they are to deliver sustainable infrastructure and activate places, grow Casey's current and emerging economies, foster environmentally sustainable practices and work towards being climate ready, advocate to state and federal governments for key services and infrastructure, create a resilient, active and connected community, ensure good governance and transparent decision-making, and finally create an adaptable, innovative and financially sustainable organisation that delivers maximum community benefit. We are faced, as Mr Boardman outlined earlier, with some fairly tight budget parameters, and that includes not only as a result of COVID-19, but also the constraints on our capacity to raise revenue. But we have worked within that to attempt to create a plan that is both responsible and proactive and delivers on behalf of the community. So the draft vision and the council plan are really designed to take the city forward, to anticipate future change, to manage growth, to ensure that we are working towards allowing the community to connect with each other and to build sustainable infrastructure, including jobs and services. I think this work has been contributed to by very, very many council staff as well, and on behalf of the panel of administrators, I want to extend our appreciation to those officers who have thought long and hard and with an innovative lens with respect to the consultation program and the way that they've put all of these documents together. They are weighty documents, but for those of you that are interested, I certainly do encourage you to read them. I'll leave it there, and I will invite both Mr Boardman and Mr Belmar to speak to the item 5.2, and firstly I'll seek a mover.
I'm happy to move the report in my name, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, can I continue on the theme of indulgence and highlight that it is almost 12 months exactly to the day since myself and Mr Belmar's appointment. And I don't want this to in any way be seen as self-congratulatory, but it is important to expand upon your comments, Chair, as to the underlying theme of these suite of corporate documents that we now own this. And we are deeply invested and committed to ensuring that we run this organisation in the best interests of all community stakeholders and to deliver on a very comprehensive, well-considered and thorough long-term vision. And just to put into context the work that has happened to get to this point, and certainly the work of the last 12 months. Myself and Mr Belmar, I think at the correlating meeting last year, we were inheriting a budget and a council plan that was derived in challenging circumstances. We acknowledged that and we made some comments to that. But we also gave a commitment to the Casey community that we would do our utmost to ensure that every decision that we made was evidence and factually based, that we were completely transparent with all of the information that we considered and we relied upon in order to make those decisions, and that most importantly we communicated reasons for our decisions as best as possible. And I think with what we're achieving tonight, Chair, it's a demonstration of our commitment 12 months ago. If I could personally note, and I'm sure that I speak on behalf of Mr Belmar, who'll make some comments, but I do want to thank Glenn and Sheena and Jen and Steve and Kerry acting, of course, for the lead, and James, of course, who's acting CEO, for the leadership and support you've given to us, and very ably assisted by Jacinta, Reese, Renee and Carol. It's been an extraordinary 12 months to really try and to instill this confidence in the organisation and this culture of high performance and transparency. And I think that the cumulative effort of the staff here who really are equally as deeply invested in the future of this municipality and the region as whole as we are, is really a testament to the work. And I say this very heartfully. I thank you genuinely. And I just would like the community to understand that we don't make these comments lightly. These are people who are ultimate professionals who really want to do the utmost to make this organisation, the community, better. Many of them live here, many of them invest in long-term through families and friends and through their careers and so forth. And I think, Chair, it's very, very important to note that. And then finally, before I do get into some of the details, also to you, Chair, for your vision, your leadership and your support to myself and Miguel over 12 months. It's been hard. We've had the benefit of your experience, your many years' experience in local government to really guide us and to get us to a very high-functioning, high-performing team. And I personally want to thank you and put on the record that I am very appreciative for your guidance and mentoring over the last 12 months. So thank you all. I think when the Local Government Act achieved royal assent on the 24th of March 2020, when it was introduced to the Parliament 2019, when it was heralded as the most comprehensive reform of local government administration in Victoria's history, of course there was no consideration that COVID would then be the subject matter of the subsequent 12 months. And that's resulted in every municipality having to not just change its focus and its governance and the way that it makes its decisions to meet the obligations under the new Act, but to do it in this extraordinarily challenging environment. I've already remarked upon the challenges that it's had on the effect of the revenue position and the expenditure position of the council, and we'll go into a little bit more detail of that. But it's also foisted upon councils this extraordinary governance requirement that could be argued is unnecessary in some extents and duplicative in some extent, but perhaps it's also a very good transformational process for many councils to get to a best practice scenario that we have at the forefront of our culture and instrumentality here, to really set those long-term agendas, to make the decisions based upon what's in the long-term community interest, and to do it through, as I said, the forefronts of an evidence type of framework. But it does come at a cost. There's an enormous burden to councils by going down this path, and it's okay for an organisation such as Casey that's got a combined budget in the next financial year of just shy of 570 million, with an operational budget of just over 420 million and capital works of just approaching 150 million. It's fine for an organisation such as Casey, where we are a large, growing municipality with a population base that's diverse, that is expanding considerably, and we all know the projected census data quite extensively, that it's going to underpin our revenue model and our investment models in many years to come. But for smaller municipalities, this must be an extraordinary burden. It must be an incredible obligation on behalf of some of the smaller metropolitan, some of the smaller regional municipalities to meet these obligations. And I think that one learning that I have in the last 12 months is that it's okay for us as administrator, with the diversity and the extensiveness experience that we have, to meet this obligation and to exceed the challenge and to provide what we think is a best case framework to comply with our statutory role. But we are very unique and very different in that regard. And I really do think that there has to be further consideration across the entire sector as to how other municipalities would confront this challenge. But Chair, as you've remarked upon the Shape Your City consultation, and this is not just an example of where Casey is at the forefront of what we consider best practice in community engagement. It's where the transformation on how, particularly the use of digital technologies and how council interacts and communicates with its stakeholders, is now going to be commonplace. And it's interesting to note that when our Chief Executive Officer, Glenn Patterson, gave a presentation to the Regional CEOs Forum in April this year, quite rightly, and with a high degree of praise and encouragement from us, he was approached by a number of other CEOs of neighbouring municipalities to really find out how we did. How did we have 25,000 followers on Casey Conversations? How did we have a reach of 155,000 through email, through electronic distributed materials? Why was there nearly 300,000 people logging into our podcasts? Why was our social media reach over 61,000, our social engagement, particularly insofar as those that were continually looking at all of our social media channels, over 1,100? Why were the newsletters approaching 45,000 distributed through the libraries? And if we look at some of the other direct communications, particularly as it relates to SMS and telephones, we had 85,000 people contacted by SMS. We had, as we've said, just shy of 7,000 people involved directly in this type of arrangement. And we've really developed a system where we've identified and segmented our stakeholders. We've developed a process where we can communicate forthrightly and transparently, and we can get the feedback and the advice from the community that goes to that mantra of shaping our city. And I think one of the most important things to note, which was a first that we think for any municipality, and I stand to be corrected if that's not the case, but it was the first time we actually had our Chief Financial Officer directly engage with the community to be talking about the budget fundamentals and to seek feedback from the community through working groups as to actually how we should be managing the finances on their behalf. And that's the important thing. We are the custodians of the community's finances. And for our CFO to take proactively that challenge and to engage with the community and get the feedback that's now been fed into our decision making, it's a very, very important output. So I just reiterate that the themes around more connected to be bold and resilient have been discussed by the Chair. But I just get into the issue which undoubtedly is going to be the underlying headline of this particular budget. That whilst last year I think I did in fact sit in this chamber, I think we were pre-restrictions at that stage, and I said that a starting principle needs to be, particularly in challenging economic times, is to do everything we possibly can to avoid any raise in fees or charges or rates. We are in a situation, after significant consideration, methodical analysis, line by line analysis of the budget, of in a position to pass on the 1.5% rate cap. We don't make this decision lightly. We understand that there will be community consultation and feedback. We are scheduling a specific consultative event here next month for the community to provide us feedback on the suite of documents, not just the budget, but we know that that's going to be the headline. But by being transparent about that, we do it understanding where we sit in the quantum of other councils and why we have to do it. And it's not a defence from us as to why we have to go down this pathway or any degree of justification, but it is contextually irrelevant that we are ranked 19 out of 79 councils insofar as our average rates. The average rates per property across all of Victoria, across all councils, is $1,774. The average rate per property in the municipality of Casey is 1,567. And whilst we are passing on the rate cap, because we do have a number of long-term contracts, we have a number of long-term capital works obligations, we have a number of longer-term community engagements. We do so because if we don't, it will create an unnecessary, undue and complicated financial pressure on the organisation for future budgets. And we don't want to be in a situation that in the future, if we do need to readjust our finances, that the hit would be heavier than doing it at this occasion. But I do give every member of the community a very solemn and sincere understanding that we started with the principle of really analysing, challenging the council officers to look at scenarios. We went through a number of scenarios of 0%, 0.5%, 1%, 1.5%. And at each time it came back to the position that in order to meet our ongoing liabilities and obligations, in order to provide the ongoing level of high quality services that we want to do on an ongoing and a longer term basis to the municipality and its citizens, this was a necessary step. It is not something that we, as I said, make lightly. It is not something that we do on the basis of a default position, but it is something we do from a very meticulously considered position that is in the longer term best interest of all ratepayers and all stakeholders in the community. So I just want to make that point, that we have considered this as extensively as we possibly can. We have challenged the organisation. The organisation has responded. We have considered a number of scenarios, but this scenario is in our longer term best position. It is also, conversely, a record capital works investment. And in the budget papers, in the documents, those who do read will see that over the 10-year horizon, this is only second to 2027, 28 insofar as its projected budget for capital works investments. It's significant to note that we are fast-tracking a number of those projects because we are trying to, as best as we can, fast-track the economic recovery post-COVID, but also to ensure that at our asset renewal, our provision of community facilities, our provision of recreational facilities, our adoption of master plans, and to provide the impetus and the background and the support to the vision that's very much articulated in the suite of documents are funded, are budgeted, are projected to be commenced and completed within that 10-year horizon. So this is something that we want to ensure that we are giving back to the community as best as we possibly can. I do want to also say that as a challenging business as this that I reflect upon the 12 months is that there's going to be additional challenges. There are going to be additional decisions that we will need to make, which some will not be popular, but they will require ratification and potentially decisions around ongoing council services. There will be decisions around how we work as an interface, as a regional council with our neighbouring councils, particularly on the provision of shared services, and these may have significant impacts from our financial position in the future. And as I said, some of these decisions are going to be very difficult to make indeed. But we do that through the long-term vision, through the community vision, through the council plan, through the budget, through the capital works program, through the annual action plan and the deliberative and community engagement update, through that starting point, the lens of transparency, of honesty, of justification, of evidence base, and to communicate as most effectively as we can with our community and stakeholders as best as possible. I'm very pleased that other councils are now looking to us as an exemplar. They are looking at how we communicate and they are seeing this as the way of the future. Albeit it changes because we are not elected representatives, but we are behaving, we are making our decisions, and we are representing and seeking stakeholder engagement from a position as if we were, and then on an elevated basis. With those comments, Chair, we are resolving, as I have moved the resolution for these documents to be put on public display for consultation. We will be scheduling events where the public will be able to provide us that feedback. That feedback will be considered and further evaluated, and we will certainly challenge the organisation on ensuring that we are making any necessary adjustments based upon what community feedback, if it transpires that that's required. But we will be in a position late June to adopt this budget with that longer term focus, as I've said, in the best interests of all Casey residents and stakeholders. With those words, Chair, I'm pleased to move the resolution.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr Boardman, for a thorough analysis of the documents. In seconding this motion, I note the words of the Local Government Act, Section 88, which might be some dry words, but they really inform the starting point for the discussion and suite of documents that are before us this evening. And I reflect in particular on the direction from the Local Government Act that a community vision must describe the municipal community's aspirations for the future of the municipality, and that it must do that based on a deliberative engagement practice. As Mr. Boardman has described, and I can also confirm my satisfaction that there has been a unique and a very vast engagement with the community. I note that there's been over 7,000 people engage with us in this process, and as we are adopting this tonight and putting this forward to the community, I invite more members of the community to also engage with the process. We are here to listen, and we are here to take on board the comments of the community. I also note the comment of Mr. Boardman and can endorse the reflection that we have not easily come to the decision we've come to with respect to the budget and the increase in rates that is reflected in the budget. That has been thoroughly tested, and I am satisfied that it's the appropriate step forward, but equally I invite the community to engage in further discussion with us about that issue. I also note the expenditure that's proposed through these suite of documents, and in particular the increased investment in capital works program, which is demonstrative of our commitment to providing services and infrastructure. And I note some of the highlights of those, which include over $70 million for the construction of a Clyde Recreation Reserve, $15 million for the Casey Fields Soccer Stage 2 works in Cranbourne East, over $8 million towards the Cranbourne West Sport and Recreation Reserve, $2 million towards a new family and community centre in Clyde, and just under $1.5 million towards the Pearstone Recreation Reserve Football and Cricket Pavilion upgrade. And again, all of these facilities are obviously required in a growing community. Casey is a community that is growing apace, and these are facilities that are required, and it is appropriate that planning is done so that they are delivered in future. I also note that additionally Council is investing the following amounts: over $62 million to upgrade and deliver recreational facilities, $46.3 million to construct and upgrade Casey's roads and footpaths, over $14 million towards renewing Casey's parks, and we're also investing significant amounts in major services, including over $40 million towards child, youth and family services, over $40 million towards waste management services, over $20 million towards arts and culture, and over $20 million towards the road network. Again, each of these expenditures and each of these plans are as a consequence of engaging with the community. I also wish to, as Mr. Boardman has done, thank the staff of Casey who have assisted us in arriving at the position we are tonight. I don't want to name them again and further cause them any more embarrassment, but they have done a power of work over the last 12 months. And I acknowledge also that it's been done in difficult circumstances during the COVID period, and we have been absolutely provided with very high level advice from professionals working at the top of their game. And it has been an absolute pleasure to be involved in this process, and I can give the community confidence that we are being advised and we are receiving advice at the highest level possible and acting upon that advice. And with those comments, I second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Before I put the motion to the vote, just to outline the consultation program and the dates. So from tomorrow, these documents, as outlined in item 5.2, the vision, the council plan, the strategic resource plan, which includes the annual budget, the schedule of fees and charges, the capital works program, and the annual action plan for 21-22 are on formal public exhibition, and submissions can be made until Wednesday the 2nd of June. All submissions that want to be heard will be heard at a council meeting on the Tuesday the 8th of June, and we are scheduled for a final consideration by the panel of administrators of all of these documents on Tuesday the 29th of June. So you'll find all of that information, I've run through it fairly quickly, will be on our website from tomorrow. So with that, I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried unanimously. And thank you for the comprehensive comments that you both made. I now move to item 5.3, which is the Casey Cardinia Library draft budget, draft library plan, draft strategic resource plan, and draft facilities development plan. Do I have a mover?
Yes, I'll move those.
Thank you, Mr Belmar, and a seconder.
And seconded, Chair.
Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar, who is our representative on the Casey Cardinia
I
Library.
am, together with Steve Coleman from Council and also with Bernard Rowan. In moving this motion, I just want to confirm for the community, as you know, that the City of Casey and CCL operates 5 libraries at Bunjil Place, in Cranbourne, in Doveton and in Endeavour Hills and in Hampton Park, and together with our partners, the Shire of Cardinia, we operate 2 other libraries in Emerald and Pakenham, as well as if I have a favourite, my favourite, the Cardinia Mobile Library, which is a fantastic service that is probably one of the busiest mobile libraries in this state. As part of our annual obligations required under the Local Government Act, we have prepared and are presenting to Council tonight our library budget, our library plan and our strategic resource plan. We've also prepared, or the CCL has also prepared, a facilities development plan for 2021 to 2025. These documents have been before a CCL board meeting, and that is how they make their way here this evening. I just want to note in particular that the CCL's total budget for the financial year coming up, which is described in these budget papers, is a total budget of just over $12 million, of which CCL has requested that the City of Casey make a contribution of just under $6.5 million. And it's will be obvious from a review of the papers that the contribution that is sought is one which reflects a small budget deficit of some $318,000 for the upcoming financial year, and which we are confident is one that the CCL can cope with and will result in a drawdown on reserves, and also be partially offset by savings achieved through the financial year. I note also that a power of work has been done by council officers together with CCL to ensure that the budgetary constraints imposed by COVID are taken into account and are being met. And finally, I note that our council's Casey's contribution represents a small increase on previous contributions of approximately $80,000 on previous years. That's with respect to the budget. We're also moving tonight, or putting before Council, a suite of other documents. I commend those to the community. Each of those documents is the result of extensive work performed by CCL staff, and I note that each of those documents sets out the long-term vision for CCL, and in particular those documents reflect the fact, just as our as we've been discussing this evening, that these are growing communities, communities that require these facilities, that this is a diverse community, and that the long-term vision of CCL is to continue to engage with its diverse community and to offer its services both digitally and physically. And on that note, or on that point, I note that the aspiration is that we are close to a million physical visits, and that is an incredible outcome for a community facility. And with those comments and with encouragement to the community to use the CCL, I move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Thank you, Chair, and acknowledging Mr Belmar's contribution to the CCL board. Not much more I can add apart from to congratulate the staff and the leadership of the library. In challenging times, it's worthwhile noting on page 37 of the annual report, which is page 376 of the council documents, even when there was restrictions around visitations, there was nearly 2 million, or projected to be nearly 2 million loans at a turnover rate of 6 for physical items and 20 for digital items up to the end of this financial year, which, considering the challenges in trying to readjust the business model to engage with the community virtually and to get books out and receive them back and so forth, that's quite an extraordinary achievement. It is also worth noting, if we look at the visits that you've said, it's just shy of 1 million, Mr Belmar, which again shows the value of this facility and its neighbouring facilities. But it is also a very vital event space, and we see that it's uptaken for future utilisation for participation in program and events attendance, particularly through its meeting rooms and its smaller galleries. Projected to be 52,000 participants next financial year, raising to nearly 100,000 on a 3-year horizon. It's a very important community asset, one that I think is an exemplar of these type of facilities, certainly in this region, if not in the state, and it's one that we should be very all proud of. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and pleased to second the resolution.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.4 is the draft revenue and rating plan. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I will move that, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder?
I'll second that.
Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, I invite you to speak to item 5.4.
Thank you, Chair. It's a similar report, if not separate, to the suite of corporate documents we adopted at item 5.2. It is our strategy, which is a revision of the strategy from June 2017. It covers the principles which underpin the setting of rates here, the framework for all revenue, and as acquired by section 93 of the Act, we have to do this on the basis of seeking public consultation, adopting it, and putting the principles that are described in the plan in practice for a period of 4 years. I did make some references in my discussion on item 5.2 in regards to where we sit with other councils, and I think I just want to expand upon those, if I could, to highlight that we did do some consultation, quite extensive consultation with other councils, the other 79 municipalities, to again get some benchmark information to see where we really fit. I've already given an indication of where we sit from a totable rateable and a per capita average base, but it's also worthwhile noting that 54 councils, or 93% of those that responded to our survey, will be expected to meet the government rate cap as per the Uniform Government's Fair Go rate system of 1.5. One council, which is a large rural council, will raise rates between 1.01% and 1.5%, and 3 councils, one regional, one small, and the City of Melbourne's all on the record, is expecting to implement a 0% rate rise. But we have developed a strategy where we have provided a uniform rate in the dollar. We have articulated a methodology around that, particularly as it applies to the capital improved value. We have given an argument as to why we think the uniform rate in the dollar is a better system, insofar and a much more fair and transparent system. in regards to the differential rate system, which is currently, I think, utilised by half municipalities in the state. We've articulated the reasons for that by being that residential properties represent just over 93% of our rate base, and they are consisting of 90% of which are on the capital improved value basis. So we are saying that where the revenue model and the way that councils are collecting their rate revenue and other fees and charges, it's challenged, it's changed, but the public accountability framework that we are now all abiding by under the new statutory requirements sets the bar for the standards that we have implemented to meet these principles and to be transparent around how we are going to be applying the uniform rate in the dollar mechanism over the next 4 years. We want to equally ensure that we are giving confidence to the community as well. We're embarking upon a CIV, or a capital improved value process. We think it is only fair that properties that have a higher capital value or capital improved value are rated at higher levels than properties of lower values. It seems to make sense. It seems that other councils, of course, through a differential rating base, do it a little bit differently, but it does not reflect the circumstances that we have here at Casey, and that the nature of being, in some parts, particularly the north of the municipality, very established communities vis-a-vis fast and rapidly expanding and growing communities in the southern parts of the municipality. So we do need to look at the variances and the diversity that makes up the total nearly 400 hectares, I think, of the municipality or 4,000 hectares, I think, to ensure that there is that balance between fairness and output. We also, as part of this plan, we set the principles for raising of fees and charges, and that'll also set the principles of cost recovery and not being onerous in the fees we raise. We note that the Ombudsman issued a report yesterday, in fact, around how councils have dealing with certain hardship matters. We have been, again, very transparent in regards to how we manage hardship matters by not passing on interest, having a freeze on interest, and not instigating actions, and dealing with a very open and consultative basis with those that are experiencing financial difficulty, for them to come to us to let us know what their challenges are, how we can assist them, and potentially look at some deferral mechanisms. But we do acknowledge that this is the primary part of the revenue of the organisation, and we have to be consistent and fair, and, as I say again, transparent in how we collect. We set the rating base, and we seek the commitment from the community to meet those principles. This is the policy that does that. So whilst I said in my comments to item 5.2, we are certainly in the bottom third on an averaged and a per capita basis as it relates to rates, we do believe that we have the balance right between looking at the capital improved nature and the differentials between the various elements of developed, less developed and developing parts of the municipality. But these principles make a vital component to our fiscal policy and our decision making overall. And by adopting this policy next month, following public consultation, it'll provide the framework for the consistency over the next 4 years that, again, hopefully will give the community confidence that we are meeting their expectations. So with those comments, Chair, I'm pleased to move the council recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. In moving, or in seconding this motion, I reflect on the following matters. It's crucial that the public can trust council and the way it raises revenue, and in particular rates. While it's obvious that revenue funds the services and infrastructure that we deliver, we are also aware that revenue is emblematic of the custodial role that we play. As a panel, we deeply appreciate that for many residents, the payment of rates is a significant financial outlay each year. The figures that we are regularly provided with and review with respect to rates and arrears show how many of the community have struggled through the last 12 months. At an individual and at a global level, the pandemic has touched all of us. But we are also aware of the ongoing need for council to continue to provide services, and it is an unavoidable consequence that we need to continue to raise revenue. But we give a obligation that we only raise revenue responsibly, and we only raise revenue as much as we need and not more. The council plan and annual budget processes provide the community with clarity and opportunity to influence how resources are utilised by council. But this draft revenue and rating plan does something more. It tells our community that this is how you can expect us to raise revenue. We don't intend to chop and change or fundamentally shift in our methodologies, like, for example, introducing a charge on top of rates. We will be clear in our principles and consistent in our approach in how we raise revenue from the community that we serve. The community can expect and businesses can plan with confidence around how rates and charges will be raised at Casey. And that is a fundamental principle in public accountability. We've been briefed by the officers on the Shape Your City deliberative engagement approach that has been undertaken over recent months and which we've addressed this afternoon. Officers have been absolutely genuine in searching and obtaining the views of the very people that our strategic planning documents affect. And I, as an administrator, am confident that we are sharing this draft revenue and rating plan today and building upon Council's previous strategy and engagement already undertaken. But there are more voices to be heard, which is why I support the continued public consultation process. So we want the consultation and the discussion on these issues to continue with the community. You can be certain that we will listen. Our agenda today includes the draft revenue and rating plan that has been prepared by council officers and considered. It has my support, but as I've said, I want to keep listening, and I want to invite the community to continue to engage with us about this. Finally, the draft plan also sets principles guiding the raising of fees and charges, which we continue to support, and the principles of cost recovery not being onerous in the fees we raise. With these comments, I second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.5 is disposal of land, 1070I Cranbourne, Frankston Road, Cranbourne. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. A seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. This motion relates to a parcel of land that on Cranbourne Frankston Road, which is set out in the motion. It relates to a parcel of land which Council intends to dispose of by private treaty to the Vic SES. We dealt with this motion at a previous council meeting when notice was given to the community that this was intended to occur. I have reviewed the documents. I'm confident that the appropriate statutory process has been undertaken, which includes a public notice in the Berwick Star newspaper, on Council's websites, and on other Council community engagement platforms. I note that as a consequence of that extensive engagement with the community and that extensive notice, that no submissions were received during the 28-day public exhibition period. Taking into account that process, and also aware of the fact that this is an opportunity for an important state body to have a base here within the City of Casey, I am happy to move this motion.
Thank you. Mr Boardman.
Just very briefly, Chair, that we've complied with our consultative and statutory obligations. The identified property is no longer required to deliver current or any future needs considered by the council. It does not qualify to be acquired under the acquisition policy or objectives for any other council service, and we can demonstrate that we have maximised market value and value for money principles with the disposal of the property. And as Mr Belmar has articulated, is for a very significant, vital and important community service which we wholeheartedly endorse and support.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I too support the recommendation. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 5.6, disposal of land at 82I Como Parade, Clyde North. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
I will move that, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Very straightforward that there's a requirement for us to begin the statutory process at 82I Como Parade, Clyde North, as part of vital infrastructure upgrades. This infrastructure being a city gas station, which has been identified by APA Group Networks as being something that will supplement the existing high-pressure natural gas pipeline, and it is necessary that council reserve land located, as we've said in Como Parade, is the suitable location for that. We do need to enter into a formal process to dispose of the land under the Act, and the officers have sought support and approval from us to do that. It is worth noting that because of the requirements under the Pipelines Act, particularly Section 85, there is an exemption applicable to APA insofar as its requirements for a planning permit under the Casey planning scheme, and therefore we have no role in the assessment of the proposed development. That will be done through a separate process. But council officers have worked with APA Group Networks on the basis of the necessity and the requirements for this piece of infrastructure to meet the needs of our municipality, and that is why we are beginning the statutory process as per the relevant sections in the Act to dispose of the land. With those comments, I'm pleased to support the recommendation of council officers.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar, would you like to speak to the item?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I note that this process is one which is now coming to an end. I note that the APA Group contacted Council in June 2020. Infrastructure of this type is infrastructure which is planned carefully and generally many years ahead. I note that the proposed city gas station has been designed to minimise any off-site risks, and then the APA Group has undertaken risk assessments for that new design and its location, and the risk profile and sensitive use buffers, including the fact that it is also proximate to residential development. And as Mr Boardman has indicated, we are giving notice of this intention. It'll be open to the community to comment on this, and comments which we will consider. And I note that it's appropriate that we engage in the statutory process. And with those comments, I second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.7 is Section 11A, Instrument of Authorisation, Planning and Environment Act 1987. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thanks, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. This is a procedural and statutory motion that we move to ensure that we keep up to date instruments of delegation and authority of staff of council to act in the name of council. It's appropriate that a motion like this is passed as when it becomes time to do so. I note that it's important that at all times all delegations are properly carried out and performed, and I thank the members of staff who have undertaken the somewhat onerous task of checking on these delegations. They take time to check carefully, but it is absolutely fundamental that they are done correctly. And with those comments, I move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Boardman.
Nothing further to add.
Put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.8, Contract Acceptance and Sealing. It's a contract for open space maintenance, north, central, south and road reserves. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
I will move that, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, we will recall, and I'm sure there will be some observers in the community will recall, that we actually did first decide upon this issue in December last year, where A process was undertaken to award the open space maintenance contracts as detailed in the report, whereby certain issues around the process, particularly from a probity perspective, were raised with us that we thoroughly considered internally and embarked upon the path of appointing a probity auditor, independent probity auditor, who conducted a thorough analysis of the tender as it was conducted last year. And although there was no findings of impropriety or malfeasance in the process, we did decide that it would be fair and in everyone's best interest to commence a new process and invite those who participate in the first process to re-tender with a new assessment and evaluation board and an elevated level of independent observation and probity applied to the process, and that's exactly what has occurred. We did discuss this debate quite extensively in December. I don't intend to go through the details. It is a contract just over $7.5 million for open space maintenance, as articulated in the report. However, I do give reassurance to the community that or certainly I am, satisfied with how this matter has been approached and dealt with. We are certainly satisfied with the recommendations that have been provided by the council officers, and those who are recommended for appointment for the contracts are deserving, are certainly qualified, and those that in a very fair and equitable process will be able to provide the services as required to meet our objectives. So as per the information which I said, I will not go into detail as we have discussed this matter previously. I am satisfied that this process has been undertaken in an equitable and impartial manner. The recommendations are fair and transparent, and I'm very pleased to support those recommendations as detailed in the report.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Likewise, I can confirm the comments by Mr Boardman that this is a matter which came before us last year for reasons to do with probity. The process was then ceased and an investigation occurred and a new process embarked upon. I'm absolutely confident that the appropriate and transparent steps have been undertaken in the awarding or in this tender, which will lead to the awarding of these contracts. I have reviewed the documents and am comfortable and satisfied in seconding this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I also note the feedback that we had through the consultation process for our council plan, that the management of open space was a high priority. So we send that message to those that are the awardees of this contract, with our expectations being high. So I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. So that concludes the consideration of the majority of our council reports from officers this afternoon. I move to item 6, which is consideration of reports of committees, and simply note the record of discussion as listed in the agenda papers. Item 7 is petitions, and there are no petitions for this council meeting having been received. Item 8 is urgent business, and there is no urgent business this afternoon. So move to item 9, and that is where I will suggest to my colleagues, on the recommendation of the Chief Executive Officer, that pursuant to Section 3, Part 5 of the Local Government Act 2020, that the recommendation is the reports listed below and their attachments are confidential in accordance with that section of the Act, for reasons specified, those being that the information would prejudice Council's position in commercial negotiations if prematurely released. So I seek a mover and a seconder to move into closed council for the consideration of item 3.1.
Yes, I'll move that we move into closed meeting.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
I will second the recommendation.
Mr Boardman. So I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried, and that is to move into closed council, at which point I will need to ask those members of our gallery to leave us and thank them for their attendance this afternoon, and thank those on the live stream for listening to the council meeting, and good afternoon. Thank you.